23 November 2024, Nantahala National Forest, North Carolina. It was just over midnight and it was completely dark in the Nantahala National Forest. It was raining heavily and the raindrops fell loudly onto the leaves. It was the heaviest storm the area had seen in a long time. A raccoon jumped off a log and began to chew on a dead mouse that lay on the ground. Suddenly, a bright light shined down the road. The raccoon climbed into a tree and hid in the leaves. 5 jeeps drove through the forest, followed by a helicopter. Close behind each other, they drove through the muddy puddles and mud splashed everywhere. The leader of this operation was in the helicopter. His name was Brian Anders. Their mission was to capture a predator. They were near its territory and looked around. Brian was looking the map of the area on his tablet. Meanwhile, he was giving instructions to the pilot. The jeeps drove by a sign. "Danger! Territory of prehistoric wildlife" was written in large letters on the sign. All of a sudden, they heard a strange noise, and an owl flew next to the helicopter and disappeared in the darkness of the night. They heard the sound again, but now it came from right next to the vehicles, and suddenly a giant silhouette ran across the road. The 5 jeeps slammed on the brakes as fast as possible, followed by the rest of the vehicles. Brian was trained for these operations, but this asset was different. "We're in its territory. We need to be careful," Brian said. 4 armed men got out of each vehicle. "Guys, check the area on the ground. We'll use the thermal vision camera to search from the sky," Brian said, and a thunder strike sounded, followed by a lightning bolt. The jeeps stood at the edge of an open space in the deep woods. The men could barely see due to the heavy rain. One of the men suddenly stopped and pointed at a tree. They were shocked to see a half-eaten raccoon perched on a branch. "We must continue," the captain said. "Brian, we haven't found any trace of the asset yet. The only thing that we have found was a dead raccoon pierced on a branch." Brian replied, "We haven't found anything either, but we need to continue. Guys, I think you guys will need to split up." He put his walkie-talkie back in his vest. "Okay, guys, we need to split up," the captain said. They were all standing in the middle of the open space when they heard something rustling in the bushes. They immediately pointed their guns at the noise. A lightning bolt struck, which revealed an enormous silhouette lurking behind them. The men came closer and closer to the sound. Lightning struck again, but this time it was gone. The silhouette was gone. The bushes rustled even harder, and suddenly a small Compsognathus jumped out. In shock, one of the men accidentally fired a bullet at a small dinosaur. That made the animal run as fast as possible into the woods. Okay, now we need to split up and find the dinosaur as fast as possible. You understand me?" the captain said. "Yes," the group said. They all split up and searched the forest, but no trace of the animal was found. It seemed like the dinosaur had disappeared. "Captain." "Yes, what is it?" "I don't see Joey anywhere." "What do you mean?" Joey! "This walkie-talkie doesn't have a signal anymore," the captain said. Suddenly, they lost another signal, and another one. "Okay, this is getting serious. Everyone, come to the open space immediately. This is an emergency." But suddenly, the captain heard something. It sounded like a growl. He got closer and closer to the sound, until lightning struck again. In a few moments, he saw a gigantic creature lurking just around 10 feet from him. In shock, he took a few steps back. "Brian, I found it. Send help immediately." "Okay, Jacob. Track Arnold's me, okay, Jacob, track Arnold's coordinates, and fly there as fast as possible. The animal slowly made its way closer to the captain. He was inspecting him. He slowly put a few steps backwards and pressed himself against the tree. The animal came closer. The captain could feel the warm breath of the dinosaur in his face, but then all of a sudden they heard a gunshot sounded through the woods. The captain saw this as an opportunity and ran as fast as possible in a different direction, but he wasn't fast enough. The massive animal quickly caught up with him, and before the captain could even react, she banged her head against his body. The rest of the team arrived and pelted her with tranquilizer darts. She kept making heavy movements and dodging the darts until she had enough. In a split second, she put her left leg on the legs of one of the men, and with her massive jaws, she tore his torso off. The rest of the team watched in horror as the massive beast munched on the man's torso. The dinosaurs stared deep into the eyes of the men. They were really intimidated by what they had just seen, but they knew that they needed to complete the mission. They aimed their tranquilizer guns at the dinosaur, but then they were shined on by bright flashlights. "Now!" Brian said. They all started shooting at the dinosaur, aiming at its neck. Now it was Brian's turn. He aimed, put his finger on the trigger, and pulled. A net shot out of the barrel from his launcher and landed right on the head of the dinosaur and strapped around its neck. She tried to open her jaws, but that was nearly impossible. She was trying to resist, but she physically couldn't do it. And then one final dart, and she fell to the ground with a thud. The men put their weapons down and checked if it was really asleep. As it has successfully been taken down, send the truck, Brian said. Suddenly, one of the men gasped. He was holding his hands over his mouth and pointing behind the dinosaur. The others came to look, and there, behind the dinosaur, they saw the captain's lifeless body laying in a puddle of his own blood. About 15 minutes later, they heard a loud sound approaching them, and then a big truck drove up out of the dense forest. It stopped right before the feet of the man. The door from the truck slapped open, and a big guy stepped out. "Come on, let's get this job done as soon as possible," the man said. A big crane was attached to the front of the vehicle. They used the cable from the crane and strapped it around the creature. Then they lifted it up and loaded into the truck. I'm getting paid properly for this, right?" the truck driver said. "We'll speak about the price," Brian said. With an angry face, the man got back into his truck and closed his door. He started the engine, and the vehicle drove back into the darkness of the woods.